All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to Transportation Public Safety Budget. We will get started today with we have budget hearings on CPost and Kansas Sentencing Commission. We'll start with our fiscal analyst on CPost.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Committee. You should have in front of you a budget analysis for the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, we refer to as CPost. The front table gives you a brief overview of the agency budget, and then there's a paragraph underneath it that describes the agency. CPost is located in Wichita, Kansas, and is the regulatory body that provides citizens of Kansas with qualified, trained, and professional peace officers. I am going to start the budget with the fiscal year 2023 analysis on page 5. The amount approved during last year's 2022 legislative session, $910,420. There were no changes to that amount. The agency is estimating a revised 2023 expenditures of $974,702, all from special revenue funds. This is an increase of $64,282, or 7.1% above what was approved in last year's session. One of the changes is a supplemental for central registry. The agency is requesting $40,000 to increase the capacity and security of their central registry database, which catalogs training and employment records for nearly 8,300 police officers. There was also an increase in their rent. They obtained an additional 847 square feet of office space due to the need for additional space for the central registry and investigative records, and the new space results in an increase in rent of $10,800. Also, a slight increase in salaries and wages, $22,000, due to increased salaries. There's a few other minor adjustments in aid to locals from the Law Enforcement Training Reimbursement Fund. And this is a separate pass-through fund that reimburses municipal agencies for personnel sent to Law Enforcement Academy. With that, the governor concurs with the agency's revised request and makes no changes.
Any questions for our analyst? Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the agency estimates, number 5, they only receive $1 from the docket fee from municipal courts.
Where are you seeing $1?
Number 5 on page 5, the agency estimate says all other adjustments.
That's a negative 8,526.
A little further down. Fund receives revenue.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're looking at the description. I apologize. Yes, the revenue is $1 docket fees for each of the court cases.
What other revenue do they receive? Do they receive money from the district court, the docket fees from district court?
I'm going to have to look that up. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure.
Further questions for our analyst? Representative Bloom.
Ma'am, who all uses this? Is it just like the sheriffs, the police, the wildlife department? What all the agencies use this in Kansas, or just a few? Or
there are actually different training centers in the state. So they could go, there's a KU training center in, I believe in Hutchinson.
on the front it says Wichita.
This agency is located in Wichita. Yes, sir.
So this is just for one agency, or is it covers them all?
This covers police throughout the state, but their office is located in Wichita.
Okay, but there's different training places throughout
Correct.
the state. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you may have answered that already when we was talking about line number 5, but I know this all comes from special revenue funds, but what are those? Is it what's covered in 5, or is there other, where's the funding come from?
That's kind of the same question.
That's
I'm going to
what I
have to
Okay.
look at that real quick.
Yeah.
And we have the agency that is here via WebEx, Doug Schroeder, and he might be able to answer that as well.
I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, we'll move on.
So for 2024, on page number 7, the agency's requesting 1.1 million, all special revenue funds for 2024. This is an increase of $94,812 or 9.7% above the 2023 revised estimate. They do have an enhancement for physical security and safety measures. This enhancement request includes controlled egress and entry into the video monitoring and ballistic material into their leased office space in Wichita. It's a high crime area, and there have been attempted break-ins, and there are currently no barriers to protect staff from a violent intruder. I will add to this, they did apply for $2.6 million from Spark funds to build a new building and relocate to a better area within the Wichita area. However, they did not get the Spark funding, so they wanted to leave this request in the budget so that they could at least beef up the security of where they are currently. And the governor concurs with the agency's request and made no changes.
Okay, any questions for our analyst on FY24? Representative Carr.
I'm just curious if you're at liberty to know what part of town are we talking about that is so detrimental that the police can't have a property holding station there, that we would have to move it.
I don't have the address with me right now.
I would just like that information if it's at all possible.
I'm sure the executive director can provide that when he testifies right after I get done.
Okay, that would be great.
He's on WebEx right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? All right, thank you very much.
That's all I have.
Very good. Well, we will move on to the executive director on WebEx.
Very good. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. Chairman Anderson, committee members, thank you for having me today. As stated, and as I was able to talk to this group about a couple of weeks ago, our agency is devoted to advancing the law enforcement profession. Our commission adopts and enforces regulations that are necessary to ensure law enforcement officers are adequately trained, certified, as well as investigate lapses of integrity and revoke certifications when necessary. Our fiscal year 23 and 24 budget was prepared with performance measures and outcomes in mind. Most of our post-budget is allocated to salaries and wages, that of 6 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. The second highest expenditure our office has is lease space. And the third highest expenditure is our central registry database and maintenance. The governor recommended a supplemental change in fiscal year 23 to include raising the capacity and the security of our central registry database. That database tracks approximately 8,200 current police officers and 3,400,000 officers current and past. The governor also recommended a change package in 24 in the amount of $100,000. This funding will support upgraded physical security at the post and upgraded physical security controls to control egress, entry, protect staff, and technology infrastructure, as well as records. Our post, and I'm going to delve into a couple of the questions that were asked. Our post is solely funded by docket fees from the municipal courts, not docket fees from the district courts or any other funding mechanism. Docket fees have been declining for the past 6 years in a row. It's something that I'd love to blame on COVID, but it started well before COVID. They are, as we believe, still adequate for fiscal years 23 and 24. However, should the trend continue, we will need to explore other alternative funding sources. I would like to take also a little bit of time to address an addition to this budget. The addition came at a timely manner, and if you have my written testimony, this would be page 2. We would like to ask for $2,300,000 in SGF funding. With that, we would like to acquire a modern office building and relocate the post operations from its current location. Because this is a little odd coming in at this phase of the game. Trust me in that this planning has been done well in advance. It started last summer when Spark funding was going to be available. It was finally made available in early January. We did apply in the amount of $2,600,000 for this funding. However, it was a competitive process and we weren't selected to receive that. Due to the timing of that request and our answer getting back to us on January 31st, that leaves us in the situation where we need to ask this committee to go ahead and consider that one-time $2,300,000 state general fund allocation. This is due for a couple of reasons. First of all, when the post started, we started in this building in 2006 and we began leasing. So I don't think it's a case of necessarily of sworn police officers, in which there are 4 in our office, that we are overridden by crime so that we can't handle it. Rather, I have many civilian employees, and I have no barriers between somebody that wanted to do them harm that would walk in our door. One of the last times, one of the area transient people walked in our door, I overheard him confront one of our employees by saying, "Are you ready for war?" These types of things shake employees, as you can imagine. And without the right barriers in place, bad things obviously can happen. So we're very pleased to get that $100,000 allocated in FY24 to put some barriers in place. However, that alone, I don't think solves all our problems. We've been leasing this property since 2006. So far, we've paid almost $568,000 in rent money, in which we have no equity in. I'm sure a lot of you were like me, right out of college. You don't have down payments for a house, so what do? You rent until you can save up some money, and that's what I'd liken this to. We've saved up some money. In the next 10 years, if we continue to lease or rent space, it'll cost us about $489,000, and that's if the lease agreement does not continue to escalate. With inflation in mind, I'm sure that we can all plan on it continuing to escalate. So this request is really 2 parts. Yes, I have a legitimate safety and security issue for not only my staff, but also our records, our infrastructure. I have a responsibility to protect all of them. But then secondly, this is a good use of money. I understand it's not chicken feed, if you will. $2.3 million is a chunk of change. However, in the long run, if we'd have done this 10 years ago, we'd have saved all of those lease payments in time. That's what I asked for it. That's why I asked for it. We do have several project target outcomes I would like to share with you if we were to receive this SGF appropriation. We do want better physical security to prevent sensitive data theft. We want controlled access to restricted areas of our office we currently do not have. we want to protect the state of Kansas assets and employees. We want to build equity through property management, or ownership rather, through ownership, and save money by eliminating lease payments. And with that, Commission, I will stand for any questions. I guess before I turn it back to you, I'll answer the two that I heard. One question was, what Kansas law enforcement officers do we serve? We serve all state police officers, troopers, KBI agents, fish and game, and all county, all tribal, all municipal, all campus. So all sworn police officers or sheriff's deputies or state troopers, law enforcement officers are certified through our office. And then I think the last question when that was answered, our location is at 1999 North Amadon in Wichita. It's known as the Twin Lakes area, approximately 21st and Amadon. And with that, I would stand for any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for the director? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Are you guys on the south side of the road or north side? I think you're on the south side, aren't you?
We're on Amadon, so we're actually on the west side of Amadon.
West side of Amadon. Okay. Because is there also a Kansas Department of Revenue place there, and possibly a Kansas Department of Labor location in that same area?
That I do not know.
Because I'm thinking there is. I'm just wondering, are they having the same issues with security, or is it something unique to your office? Just trying to figure it out, because it's not exactly a dangerous location, I don't think.
We, yeah, like day-to-day dangers, most likely not. We are on the third floor of an office building, and we've had enough people, us and several other occupants of the office space, had enough people in. Management put locks on our joint bathrooms so that not just anybody could walk in. We have had our business, the building was burglarized. They tried to get into our doors and gave up on prying and breaking them. We've had our post vehicles out front broken into. I'm sure there are much higher areas of crime in Kansas than here, but we haven't been a stranger to that. I don't want to totally ask for this funding based upon what we've experienced there. I think it's more of a good stewardship of money and ceasing the lease payments and start building some equity in property.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Representative Bloom.
I might have missed it. Did you say how many officers you train a year?
So I didn't bring that. Last year, basic training alone, we certified 600 something officers. Currently, Kansas has 8,200, 8,300 officers currently certified. We track the training of all of those officers. That's one of the divisions in my office. The central registry records each officer has to have 40 hours of continuing ed, a minimum of 40 hours. So they track in what areas those continuing ed hours are in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any further questions? Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on Representative Delperdang's question, there used to be a Department of Revenue building downtown. Is that still there, or is that no longer available?
I do not know anything about a Department Revenue location in Wichita.
I know that's where they used to hold DL hearings and also some drug tax hearings as well. So I know it was fairly secure. I was just wondering if they're still doing that or not, and if that building was partially available or not. Thank you.
Representative Delperdang.
Mr. Chair. I think the building you're talking about is the Ronald Reagan building, kind of downtown area, off of Waco or something like that. But it's a multi-story. I want to say 2-3-story building. But yeah, that's a good question. That's a building that is currently owned. And do they have possible space in there? So it's just curiosity, though.
Anything further? All right. Well, thank you very much, Director.
Thank you, committee.
All right. We will close the budget hearing on C-Post, and we will move on to the Kansas Sentencing Commission. Our fiscal analyst, take it away.
You should have in front of you the budget analysis for the Kansas Sentencing Commission. The Sentencing Commission was created in 1989 to develop sentencing guidelines, model, or grid based on the fairness and equity, and to provide a mechanism for linking justice and corrections policies. The Commission also administers the Substance Abuse Treatment Program that was created by the 2003 Legislature. We currently refer to that as SB 123. You'll notice at the bottom of page 1, in addition to the funding from last year's legislative session, there is a reappropriation of $2.7 million state general fund. And again, this is mainly due to the funding for the SB 123 program. I will begin the budget hearing on page 5, or the budget overview for fiscal year 2023. Again, there's some information there about the reappropriation of the $2.7 million. The agency requests a revised estimate of $12.8 million, including $12.6 million state general fund in expenditures and 15 FTE positions in 23. This is an increase of $130,000 or 1% above the approved amount from last year. The increase is mainly attributable to capital outlay upgrades for the research statistical modeling software and other assistance, which is the SB 123 drug treatment program. There's a very slight reduction in state general fund of $1, and then the other adjustments again is the drug treatment program and also the RAFT program, which is a program that was passed in last year's legislative session, the Recovery from Addiction for Treatment, or 2 years ago, I guess, 2021. The governor's recommendation is a revised budget of $12.7 million, including $12.6 million state general fund, a slight decrease of $24,518 0.2% below the agency's estimate, and this decrease is due to a reduction in funding in salary and wages.
Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Any questions for Shirley? Okay, move on.
On page 8, we will look at fiscal year 2024. The agency requests $10.2 million, including $10.2 million state general fund in the same 15 FTE positions. It's a decrease of $2.5 million or 19.8%, and this is mainly attributable to that reappropriation that shows up in 23 that is not in 24. There are 2 enhancements. One is a software maintenance enhancement of $100,000. They are contracted with a vendor called Domo Inc. to create an electronic journal entry system. It replaces the current hard copy documents that the agency receives. The initial startup costs of this venture were funded from a grant, $276,000, and they need $100,000 for annual vendor maintenance and licensing of this program. The second enhancement is $145,716. This has to do with the fact that they are now looking at two different treatment programs, the SB 123 drug treatment program, and the new one, the Recovery from Addiction or for Treatment, or RAFT. And in order to pay the vendor Beacon Health Options, they need to have the IT implementation and maintenance costs to be able to separate out those payments from those two programs. So they're asking for $145,716. Again, the all other adjustments is just the fact that they don't have that reappropriation in 2024 that they had in 2023. The governor recommends $10.2 million, including $10.2 million for 2024. This is the same decrease of $24,518 in state general fund, and this is in salaries and wages. The additional funding for the executive director's salary increased, so the reduction in funding is accomplished by increasing their shrinkage rate. And I will stand for questions.
Any questions on 24? Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So she did not improve the software maintenance or the bill payment services?
She approved both enhancements. Her only decrease was the $24,000.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Shirley. We will move on to Scott Schultz, the Executive Director of the Sentencing Commission.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having me today. On behalf of the 17-member commission, I know that there are several of you who I'm very well acquainted with, and I think there's a few newbies as well, and happy to talk a little bit more, or as much as you want to, about the commission. I've been executive director with the commission for over 11 years now. My prior past was as a trial prosecutor on federal and state courts. And so the commission itself is a policy-making body that we recommend sentencing reform efforts. We have 9 bills right now that we've introduced as well. But part of that has to do with the sentencing guidelines and felonies throughout the state. And so we're the commission members that are made up of everybody from Secretary of Corrections, Prisoner Review Board, to several, we have several House members, several Senate members, Attorney General's office designee, lots of prosecutors and defense attorneys, as well as public members. These individuals come together representing the entire cross-section of the criminal justice system to be able to really be the cream of the crop and be able to talk about some of the things that we can do better in the justice system. And so I have the honor of being able to coordinate those activities and as well as run an agency that we provide data to the legislature on criminal justice matters. We are designated as a state statistical analysis center, easy for me to say, for the state of Kansas. What that actually means is we maintain databases for felony criminals history throughout the state. We also gather and cooperate with KDOC as well as KBI. We maintain their records that they transfer to us to the tune of about over 4 million records. And so with that, then we can actually provide trends. We provide an annual report as far as criminal justice trends and those type of things. Our value that we bring is in the data. And those type of things that House Corrections Committee sees on a regular basis are data-driven based upon what that data tells us coming out of our office. We're an independent agency. We're freestanding. We are not associated with DOC or KBI or Attorney General's office, and it's a good thing that we're not. just simply because we can stay objective. We can be able to show you what the data is on those. Most of the time with the legislative context, we're looking at bed space impacts. And so those committees that actually, that some of you have been on or currently on, have seen those bed space impacts that we can actually estimate based upon the bill language what exactly the bed space, prison bed space may be for that particular bill based on that language. So I neglected before I started, our finance manager is here with us as well, Kim Sage. You may recognize her. She was committee assistant for Senate Judiciary last year and then decided to come our way. So, and we have been very fortunate to actually have her. So, in addition to the research aspect, Shirley talked about the Senate Bill 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Program. This was one of the first programs in the country back in 2003 that the legislature approved that provides treatment for possession offenders that the court orders into treatment. And we have about 120 providers that are certified throughout the state and in your communities that provide substance abuse treatment. So that is the bulk of our budget, probably 92% of our budget, and it acts as a pass-through to actually pay those treatment providers for the services. We set cost caps and length of stays, kind of like an insurance company almost, as to anything from inpatient treatment all the way to outpatient treatment for substance abuse treatment. And so that is a program that has been in our office for, as I said, since it was passed in 2003. A couple of points that I wanted to touch on for we generally are in favor of requesting that you pass the governor's rec for 23 and 24 with just a couple exceptions. On the second page of my testimony, I've talked a little bit about in 1C, the salary and wages issue. We have, I think there was some extraneous $24,518 before the governor actually, or after the governor submitted her budget that contained this recommendation. Leadership actually was able to talk with the governor's office. We were able to get things straightened out as far as a increase as far as the executive director's salary was concerned. And so we're going to actually make a recommendation as part of a GBA to actually include, put that 24,518 back in. The other item, the second item would be there on House Bill 2023, House Bill 2070. This was, I've just been talking about the Senate Bill 123 program. This bill will actually expand that to non-person felonies. Currently, it's only available to drug offenders. We know that folks steal, forge documents and those type of things to actually support their addiction. And so this would expand the program to allow for treatment for those individuals while they're on probation. You passed this out on final action yesterday, 223 to nothing. And it was just read in today on the Senate side. So I would ask that there be a placeholder, at least anyway, maybe an omnibus or whatever for those funds. We're looking at, based upon the scenarios that we ran, somewhere between 592,000 and 1.7 million. I would probably err on the side of the 1.7 million, just simply because I had occasion to check with, we have a wonderful relationship with Department of Corrections, have them check with staff in terms of seeing of individuals that are incarcerated, how many of those folks have substance abuse issues. What they reported back was about 40%. This is actually 30% at 1.7 million. So we may actually be under based upon what we're seeing, at least in the prison context. That may be a little less, but if you've been in the criminal justice space long enough, you know that substance abuse and mental health drive the criminogenic needs of some of these folks. And so sometimes one over the other, and vice versa. So those two items would be something that we would ask to be able to consider. Again, we're going to be requesting that GBA from the governor on the salary issue, but just be aware that that HB 27 is actually moving its way through the system. With that, pleasure to be here with you, and be happy to stand for any questions that you may have, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for the director? Representative Delperdang.
Good to see you, sir. Yes. On your attachment 1, or I can call it page 3, whatever, attachment 1, the year 2020, and I see the 2 asterisks there, and it talks about as a result of the COVID pandemic, the massive decrease, if you would. But what happened, by what I mean, not pandemic, but what happened with the inmate population? Was there a big spike in recidivism? Did they get out early? What really happened during that time frame?
Yeah, Representative, that's a great question. And part of, just to explain attachment 1, this kind of gives you an example of things we do. Part of the Commission's charge is to take KDOC data in the summer, every summer, and be able to provide a prison population projection. And this represents how we did our performance, basically performance-based measure. This is the big one to give you an idea of how close. And that table that Representative Delperdang was talking about represents on that right column the percentage of error that we had from what the actual population was versus what the projected population that the Commission actually did. When we saw a 10.7% decrease in the population, folks weren't being let out early because of the pandemic. It was an issue of the courts were closed, if you recall, and so we had backlogs that started occurring. Most of those were more serious offenses because they couldn't have jury trials. And so as a result of that, you have a backlog in cases. Folks that would normally go to prison aren't going. And so our releases actually outpaced the admissions. And so you started seeing those decreases. Folks that were going to be getting out anyway, they were still getting out. So we saw that. There were obviously issues on the probation side. A lot of probation offices were closed. And so, as you know, part of the probation process is you come in and report to your probation officer multiple times, depending on whether you're on court services or community corrections. When those were closed, you have an offender that may be less likely to be revoked because they're not necessarily reporting in person than maybe by phone. You can't do UAs to potentially violate them because they're on something. So those type of things, there was less revocations as a result of that. There were less admissions because you had court closures and backlogs of cases. As we progressed now, and that was part of, certainly when we made the projection, we had no idea that in March we would be closed down and the pandemic would have started. So, otherwise, if you look in terms of how the computer model that we use, how it actually is doing, it's fantastic. And I'm biased, of course, but when you look at things like that, when your political pollings, you're looking at 5% on either side. Normally, on average, I get my folks to be 2% on either side. So that, and why does that matter? It saves taxpayer dollars. If we can actually make a significant contribution in terms of showing just exactly what the prison population is going to be in the next 10 years, that saves DOC, or it helps them plan, because it usually takes them 2 or 3 years to get architecturals, everything else set up to actually build new facilities. If we can tell them that there's not going to be a prison population explosion in the next several years, then they obviously have a situation where we're going to save money. Some of the situations that have occurred in the past has been like at KJ, where they're overbuilt. And so they'll never ever fill that space unless you put perhaps adult population in those buildings. So that's the type of value that the commission, and representative obviously is very well aware of that, but that's the value that the commission brings, is to be able to hopefully be save taxpayer dollars by being able to utilize this model that we have.
And going forward, is there maybe practices or even sentencing grids that maybe we need to adjust if it appears this is working? I mean, it was a chance that it happened, but is it something we could take advantage of moving forward?
I think the danger right now is part of and some of you are not aware, we have a grid system that is based upon criminal history and the severity level of the offense. And so if you or I were charged with the same offense, but I had larger or greater criminal history, I'm going to be punished greater than you are, certainly. Part of that determinate sentencing allows us to do what we do here. Years ago, before 1993, you got the 5 to 15 year sentence, the 15-year to life sentence. Those type of sentences make it very difficult to try and work a model that we're actually using. And so, what I would say would be what we have actually, I don't know how you can actually predict some type of catastrophic crisis that we would have, but those are the type of things of, interestingly enough, after 2020, the model actually came back and held pretty well. We have to make assumptions, certainly, and we do that with KDOC collaboration, so that we, every single year there are other dynamics, changes in policy, changes in the statute, those type of things that make their way into going into the model. And so that's, the hope is that we don't see something like that again. Thankfully, in this particular context, the prison population went down substantially. We were at facility capacity, and now we're in the low 80%. But it's working its way back up because now the backlogs have been resolved, and we're seeing those increases again like we were pre-pandemic.
Thank you for answering. It's good to see you, Scott. I've enjoyed working with you through the years. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you again. Thank you for your testimony. I just have one quick question. Back when I sat on Corrections, Juvenile Justice, the state was pretty much close to capacity, and now we're down almost 2,100, somewhere from them.
Yes.
Do we? I know we had in the past, but are any of those persons that are incarcerated outside the state of Kansas, or has that been taken care of?
Representative, my understanding is that everybody has been brought back. If you recall, we were flying people to Arizona. Those folks have been all brought back. What I would caution, and this is going certainly beyond your question, but what I would caution you, and this is a plug for DOC, but we talk about facility capacity, but I would also ask the committee to consider staffing capacity, because they are at 101% staffing capacity right now on the male side. They've got some breathing room with regard to the female facility, but they are at 101% capacity as of last month in staffing, because they have those vacancies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Well, that was a nice, quick, easy day. That will close the budget hearing on Kansas Sentencing Commission. And our next meeting is Monday, February 13th. Have a good weekend and go Chiefs.